The show started in the first place, we've got to give credit where credit's due, to David Frost. He asked me if I'd like to do a comedy show. He was doing a show with John Cleese and some others, the Frost Report. And at that same time, John Cleese, Graham Chapman were good friends. We shared a flat together. And we were on holiday with a friend of ours who was writing the Frost Report, Marty Feldman. And I knew I wasn't going to do it on my own, so first of all I asked John. And of course he came on board immediately. Then Graham, and then Marty. And the funny thing was that after the first show, the pilot, David Frost said to me, don't think the audience are going to like those funny eyes. But of course that was his fortune. There was a moment when we were looking in a shop outside the British Museum. It was a joke shop, and I remember it was stink bombs, the biggest stink since Hitler. But at that moment, a boy came up, looked at us, looked at Marty and said, are you the one with the funny eyes? We thought, well, if he wasn't, who was? Graham Chapman, John Cleese and I were very good friends at university. John and I actually studied law together, and used to giggle in the lectures about, would see a case where 400 Italians were on a boat and you knew they were going to be dead in 5 minutes, so we would giggle at the back. The fact they were Italians is irrelevant. The review of 1963, Graham had actually left there, but he went to London and actually ended up on Broadway, where we did the Ed Sullivan show and we had a great time in America. And quite a lot, when we got back, John and I and Graham were in a radio show called I'm Sorry I Read That Again. And Graham was finishing off his medical stuff, starting to write with John and with me. And so it was natural that the three of us would work together. And I love team stuff, and you can't get a better team than that lot. And of course, Amy MacDonald came in, and she is an essential part of it. John and I are rather naive, sort of 22, 23-year-olds. Marty suggested we went to look for a girl in this club. Now, we went to see, and this beautiful girl came on. We couldn't understand why we were so popular with the ladies there. They came and sat next to us. Quite clearly they were call girls, but we were too naive to know. Anyway, Amy, in the good tradition of Hollywood, fourth girl from the right, she was fantastic and remained so. It used to be a joy writing for Amy, because if she read it first time accurately, she'd always do it well, and if she didn't, you knew it was wrong. But she's sort of very underestimated in this. She added a extra element, was very important. I couldn't play all the women's parts.
Municipal Ballroom and Rabbi Greasing Institute in Bournemouth for the finals of the Name Family Trophy.
The comedy influence is, I think all of us will have slightly different, but mine were very much verbal, funnily enough, radio comedy. There used to be things called like Much Binding in the Marsh and Take It From Here. I also like visual, and somebody like Buster Keaton was terribly important. But at the time, the biggest effect on all of us was the review of Beyond the Fringe, which it was like, I mean, just everything opened up there. They did, you know, talk about it being a satirical show, wasn't it? It's just one of the funniest things ever done. And that came out sort of as we were at university, and immediately after that there was satire, where That Was the Week That Was, but we reverted against that, and we always called ourselves Music Hall, so we were sort of halfway between the two. Ironically, I actually did a tour of the States with That Was the Week That Was, and mostly brought in the Cambridge Circus stuff that was then going to be on the 48 show, so it's pretty incestuous.
This is a little song I wrote to chase away old Mr. Blues, and it's dedicated to me. I love the lovely Amy MacDonald.
A lot of people debate where the title came from.
At last, the 1948 show.
I think it was the Trevor Nunn, the excellent director, who thought of it first, and he and John thought it was a funny title, and John suggested it, and for once we all agreed instantly. We always work pretty close together as a four, but you can't write four together. And I think you're going to generalise. John and Graham wrote a lot together, and Marty and I hadn't before, but we did then. And I noticed it says that John and I were sort of executive producers or something like that, and I think we put the thing together, but that was very much a team thing. That was the joy of it, really, and people would bring in bits of sketches, and you'd work on it together and make it better, and that's a great way of writing, I think. And I found a piece the other day which was a sketch for this, which it starts out with my handwriting and ends up with John Cleese's, and that's probably, I thought, oh, you finish it or pass it over and his writing's better than mine. It's as simple as that, I think. Good time. We did enjoy the whole making of it enormously. And there's a man that always gets left out of the praise here. One of our best scriptwriters ever, Dennis Norden, used to come on the day before the show, and he would be our referee, because you can imagine with 4 fairly big egos and writers there, you needed somebody to come in to say, I'd cut that down. And the fact that we all trusted him says a lot for him.
Now, as you know, tonight we are going to raid the Pink Rhinoceros nightclub, and it's your job to infiltrate unobtrusively amongst the clientele as ladies of the night.
You've got to remember, in those days, tape was very expensive, and you couldn't just record onto it whatever you wanted. You actually, when you wanted to edit something in, you had to cut the tape and put it in. And you'll see one, which is the Plainclothes Detectives. I am normal, and the other 3 come on in drag. Now that's funny anyway, so I was quite likely to giggle, but what they did, they'd obviously decided amongst themselves to give, suddenly I said, what are you going to call yourself? Out came names I'd never heard of before. If you watch it now, we couldn't really change it because it would have cost too much money to cut in and out, so it's left in. I'm glad it is, because you can see them trying not to giggle, just at making me look silly, and then Marty dries completely and I have to tell him to come in, but it's one of those ones I've seen a few times recently, and I laugh every time. It's bad discipline, bad acting, terribly unprofessional, and I'm very glad we did it that way.
Philippa, sir.
Philippa?
Yes.
That is a nice name. That is
Hawkins. Samantha, sir.
And, Bute, don't tell me Bute.
I thought it was Doris, sir.
That's good, well, that's splendid.
Sir, do I have to be Doris, sir? It's such a mousy name.
Well, what would you prefer?
There's a sketch that we did, I think, originally on radio, I'm sorry I read that again, which is Top of the Form, where it makes me laugh because there's always that moments when it's so unfair, and there was a programme called Top of the Form, and every answer suddenly became pork, pork, and then somebody says pork, because everybody has, and I think John's line is, no, you're just guessing, aren't you, which makes me chuckle each time. Again, it allowed us to dress up as schoolboys and schoolgirls and get paid for it, which was a change. It was good fun, that. The one or two that I'd rewritten, there's one which I do, which is the Chartered Accountant Dance, and that used to be called the Flubber originally, and it was doing things. It started off because when the twist was famous, you used to do it by stubbing out a cigarette and doing a towel, so we thought we'd make it more ridiculous, but by the time we got the 48 show, accountants, chartered accountants were in our headlights. We thought they were the most boring people in the world. We were slightly worried about our own accountant, but he liked it because he was a certified accountant and his wife was a chartered accountant. But I was eventually asked to actually speak, and accountants do. The student accountants thought it would be good for their image if I told them where they went wrong, and I said, well, I would give up accountancy if I were you. Go and dance.
My name's Angus.
Oh,
You know, I like you.
oh, how nice.
Who you for, England or Scotland?
What?
If you look at the Scottish National Ballet supporters, you can see all sorts of Barry Crowes in that one. Also other, if you look closely, you'll recognise Amy suddenly is a member of the audience. What is very unusual of that is that Marty's playing the straight man. That was very rare. He was always best as third banana. We had one sketch, I don't think it's on here unfortunately, which was, it was an antique show called Going for a Song, which went out at the time, and I would be the person introducing it, and we'd have a valuable vase or something. He'd go to John, who would be slightly pretentious grandmother, and you knew Marty at the end with his eyes. When he got it, he'd just smash it. And so eventually we're passing things down, and I thought, now, a diamond, this is a diamond, all thinking now, how's he going to deal with this? And he just swallows it, which is, he's best at fourth mark. But in the ballet sketch, he's the straight guy. One of my favourites was Mice Laugh Softly Charlotte. You may wonder where these silly names came from. A lot of the names in the show is Nosmo Porkpranger or whatever it is. Marty Feldman was writing one of the best comedy radio shows ever, Around the Horn at the time, with Barry Took, and I used to go to the recording. He used to work with Barry Took, I think, 2 days a week, and work with me 3, and if you listen to the Round the Horns, you'll hear those sort of very strange names coming out. But the Mice Charlotte abbreviation was originally one we did on stage, but we changed it. It was all the idea of this hitting people and then falling over while you deliver your dialogue, and then you come at the other person, and it just made me laugh watching it recently, and I thought, I'm so proud to be part of that. And you suddenly notice there's Bill Oddie as a sort of henchman, and then there's a lift man at the back who's Eric Idle. There's a girl who's just in that particular show, who's very good, comes on as my girlfriend, just in a bikini, as you do, or as you on Dreams. And it's a great show. There's also the one that on there, which is the library one, which I like, which is suddenly everybody's obeying the library rules and not making a noise, even though I'm the usual robber with a striped shirt and swag and a mask.
Hello, hello, hello!
And the minute somebody goes gun, people go shh, and that was good fun to do. Barry Cryer came into that. It was almost like a repertory in a way. There's one sketch in there which makes me feel quite tired watching it, which is when I'm the hospital visitor. On the National Health, people in hospital, if they hadn't got a visitor, then you set this machine off and they get this appalling, and I just used to exhaust me, because I did it on stage originally. And with Bill Oddie, who was, had been in the original show with us, and so obviously nobody else was volunteering to do that part, so Bill came in and did his original part, which was terrific.
If you would like me to bring you in... No, please, you go on. Mine wasn't at all interesting, really.
What you notice with some of these early comedies is that if you get the Four Yorksmen or you get the Sidney Lotterbys, we're all sitting very close together, very unlikely at the far side of a table, not round a table, because you couldn't, in those days, cut in so well. And there's a moment in the Sidney Lotterby when I've obviously been told to turn to camera, and I've been talking about this and suddenly turned to camera like that, rather unsubtly, and then back again. I hope I've learnt. Marty and I basically wrote that. I think, again, we all got together, and he suggested, I said, what's a good name? He said, oh, Sidney Lotterby, right? I said, OK. Now, little did I know that Sidney Lotterby was actually a real person. And when I went to the BBC to do a series called Broaden Your Mind with Graham Garden, who was our producer, but Sidney Lotterby, and I thought he was a fiction of our imagination. There was an album, an LP of the show, the last 1948 show, and on it was the Sidney Lotterby sketch, and people in drunken estate around London would pick up the phone late at night and think, oh, I wonder if we can find Sidney Lotterby. Oh, yes, there he's in the book. Hello, are you Sidney Lotterby? No, Sidney Lotterby was not best pleased.
My name's Sidney Lotterby.
Oh, there's a turn-up. My name's Sidney Lotterby.
So's mine.
And mine.
Well, isn't that a coincidence, all being called Sidney Lotterby?
I've never been bitter in my life, but there was a moment a few years ago when I was, because I used to keep hearing, isn't it the greatest sketch ever, the Four Yorksmen? I say, yeah, it is, because people didn't know that I'd co-written it.
Who'd have thought, 40 years ago, that we'd be sitting here drinking Chateau de Chasselas?
I would have been glad of the price of a cup of tea, then.
Somebody gave me the entire credit for it recently, which is ironical, because I've never been given credit before. But we very much wrote it together. And it was one of those sketches, if you think about it, that you start to exaggerate and it becomes fun, you get more and more exaggeration. In fact, I know that I've rewritten that sketch myself several times, I know other people have. But it is one of those things that the minute somebody starts to boast, then you find others think, hey, that's like the Four Yorksmen sketch, and it's lovely to see it.
Right. We used to get up in morning at 10:30 at night, half an hour before we'd gone to bed, eat a lump of poison, work 29 hours a day at mill for 8-year lifetime, come home, and each night Dad would strangle us and dance about on our graves.
Aye, and you try and tell that to the young people of today. Will they believe you?
No! When we did the last 1948 show, was an independent television production company, Rediffusion. It didn't even go out in all the regions all the time in England. We were on the front cover of the TV Times here, but down below, I say down below because they had offices below, was the Do Not Adjust Your Set team, and the producer of that was our Cambridge Circus producer. And I actually, if you said to me, were you ever in Do Not Adjust Your Set? I said no, but then I saw the tapes, and yep, I was, as a frogman who seemed to be desperately wanting his moment of glory, but getting told to push off, and probably in rehearsals it was stronger language than that.
I heard that Michael Palin was ill, so I thought I might pop along and fill in a few gaps in my frogman routine.
Push off.
I honestly don't know why I was in Maybe they panicked a bit and felt it needed something a bit extra. I like to think that's the reason. But sadly, even I don't believe it. After 48 show, BBC realised that Marty was hot property, and he hadn't done anything, so he actually asked me would I go with him to the BBC. And I nearly didn't, because the woman at the BBC offered me 9pence, and my agent said, well, I've never heard of him, she said. Anyway, I did go there, and 2 very good series with Martin, very good fun, and I played his wife quite often, and it was at a time when I think it could easily have been in Python then. I don't think I'd have been right for Python. I don't think I'm as good a writer as some of the others, and I think they're very much a writing and performing team. But while I was doing Marty, I was asked by the head of comedy there, Michael Mills, would I like to do a comedy, a series of my own? And I said, yeah, but again, I want a friend. And it just so happened that Graham Garden was qualifying as a doctor, and he wanted to leave, and it was Eric Idle that brought us together. He had followed me as president of the Footlights, Graham, and we sat out and wrote these series of thing called Broaden Your Mind. And the first one, I think, is one of the best shows I've been in. But the second series, Bill Oddie joined us to sing songs, and we were doing the radio show, I'm Sorry, Read That Again. So a lot of the sketches were in the 48 show, I'm Sorry, Read That Again, Broaden Your Mind. But the BBC wanted a 3rd edition of Broaden Your Mind, but they wanted it different. Now, Python had just started then, and they were brilliant. The problem with sketch comedy is you get to a punchline, and then you've got to start all over again. They got round it, usually by Graham Chapman coming in and saying, this is silly, this is boring, let's go somewhere else. Well, we got round it by having 3 characters who basically represented right, middle ground, left wing. And each week we had a story, but basically, if you look closely, there are 4 or 5 extended sketches intermingled. So that's how the goodies were born.